Oh, okay, here we go. This is starting in Canada in 1923. Mom is traveling from Canada to Los Angeles. Oh my gosh. And I want to ask what it's like for you to travel from Canada in Winnipeg, Canada.
We came in an open touring car. I don't know if it was a Ford or a Franklin, and had a two-seater. There was my Uncle Emil, my father and my mother, Victor, who was 4, and I was 3, and Frank was a baby. He was probably 8 months, just a little baby. And we toured from Canada, going right through the states, cutting through farmers' yards. There wasn't roads for traveling. You had to just take off and go through the farms until we got, we'd stop and make meals beside the road, make a little fire and cook, and kept going that way all the way to California. And we ended up in it was Los Feliz and Fletcher Drive. There's a big Save-On market there now, but when we landed, there was a big campground for people like us who were traveling. They set up their tent there, and there was a stream of water that went alongside, and there was a cowboy ranch right behind us, and we would watch this cowboy. I think it was Tom Mix.
Tom Mix, yes.
And he would ride his horse around his big corral, big yard there, and he'd stand on the back of the horse and with his holding on to the reins, and he would ride, and we had it was very entertaining, always something, and these were all people traveling, and eventually we lived there for a few months, and then my father bought a home on Glen Eden Street, 2652 Glen Eden Street. And that was a nice little home, and with a nice big backyard to have a garden and chickens and rabbits. And it was only a block from Alessandro School, which was very good. When we started school, we started there and went all the way through Alessandro. I guess all of us kids did, except Herbert and John. And
No, that's perfect, Mom. Perfect.
uh-huh.
How did you spend the night when you were traveling across the country?
You know that we
How
were
did you
so.
cook, and how did you spend the night?
My dad would set up a tent. We had a tent on this big Franklin car, big open touring car with a cloth. What do you call it? A cloth top.
Top, yeah.
Yeah. And so we slept wherever we could. Set up a little tent and came through Farmer John's backyard.
And you would cook. What did you have for food?
They had. Well, let me first say that back there they had what they called mud balls, and as you went through the farms, these balls of mud would collect on your tires, and they would have to stop and clean off the mud balls to keep going all the way. When Mother would cook on the ground, they'd make a little fire, and one day she set her pan, a gravy pan, off of the fire, and little Frankie, who was just barely toddling.
How old was Frankie then?
Frank was about two, about
Yeah.
two,
Yeah,
and
two.
he was barely walking well, and he sat down right in the middle of the frying pan.
Oh my.
Oh, so all the way, Mother had to carry Frank on a pillow because he had got his little seat burned. There was not the thought of safety back there. People didn't practice safety like they do nowadays. It was but my Uncle Emil
What did you eat for food? What was your food?
18 years old.
When you were traveling across the country and you're camping like that, what was your food?
That's hard to remember, but you know, Mother was from Iceland, and she was a good cook. And we had our morning hot cereals. We had, I can remember, eggs, frying eggs on the open fire on the ground. And all her cooking was done outside on the fire in Farmer John's backyard. We went through farms. That's the only, well, there was no roads. You just had to aim for California and come through people's yards, but we had no, I was so little I don't remember any difficulties at all. Only when Frank got hurt.
Frank burned his bottom.
Frank burned his little bottom, and he came all the way on a pillow.
Oh.
Yeah, on my mother's lap.
Food
Yeah.
you had, how did you buy food? Did you buy it from the farmers?
Yes, Mother being from Iceland, you know, and there's no grocery stores. You have to have everything on hand and cook for yourself. And that's way because of her background. We would have, I can remember the eggs frying and the bacon. And we had oatmeal or mush, they called it back then, for breakfast. And then as you went along, they would pick up vegetables and fruit from farmers.
And you remember flat tires? Tell us about the car, that Franklin. Would it break down many times?
It was an open Franklin car, a two-seater with the soft top. And I was too little to remember breakdowns except for tires.
Tires, yeah. What about tires?
Yeah, it was very rough on tires. And most farmers were very nice about letting the Mother and Dad stop and stay overnight and continue on to no roads. You're just going.
No roads at all.
No roads. Just going through farms.
And why did you come to Los Angeles? Why did you know that you had to go to Los Angeles?
You
Why
know,
did you come so far. You were in Winnipeg, Canada, and you were happy there. Why did you come to Los Angeles?
Because Winnipeg was cold, and my Mother and Dad's dream was to come to California, to a warm, sunny California. And our time living at the Silver Lake Auto Camp there, where all people were in the same boat. They were all traveling and trying to find a place in California, and it was a nice camp, a nice auto camp by the government, and a little stream of water came down. What is that street that comes down the back of the hill? Silver Lake, yeah.
Silver Lake, okay.
Yeah, it was Silver Lake. It was right there.
And how long were you in the camp, Mom?
And we were there, must have been probably about a year and a half, and then they found this little house, a little frame house at 2652 Glen Eden Street, and it was handy for the school, and it ended up that my mother was there alone with us children, and my father had remarried. And
so he left. He went back to Canada?
No, he didn't. He stayed in California. He married a woman. All I knew was her name was Beatrice. And my mother and dad divorced. And so the owner of the property was so good to my mother. He let her live there for a whole year. And
with no rent? No rent at all?
No rent. I think it was $15 a month. And we couldn't pay it. She worked in the garment factory sewing, and we went to school.
What did your kids do during the day? What did you do during the day?
Oh, we had a great big tree in the backyard with a swing, a rope hanging down, and all the neighborhood kids would come to our house. And we had chickens and rabbits in the backyard. And Victor was interested in electronics, and under his bed, when he got out of trash day, anything that looked like electronics or what do you call the bulbs?
Yeah.
Yeah, and we
Tubes.
could,
Yeah.
tubes. He could never clean under his bed because those were all his treasures. That's what he got into in life too, was electronics, and had his own electronics shop in Winnipeg, Canada after he married.
And what was it like in grammar school? What was it like when you went to Alessandro Senior?
Alessandro School. My mother was a dressmaker, so I always looked nice, and the boys always were nice and were clean. We walked just a block to school, and it was a good school. And I can't remember anything unusual. We had a very happy childhood.
Oh.
Yes, we did.
And who did the cooking?
And my mother cooked. Eventually, she had a friend who came from Texas, Truth Thomas, and her husband and her divorced, and she came and she had left a little baby. He divorced her, so she couldn't take the baby. So she was so happy to come and live with my mother and take care of us three children. And then later Herbert and John, she took care of them too.
And she brought a baby with her?
No, because her husband kept the baby, and so it filled her heart to come, and she was a Christian woman, to come and live with us, and she cooked, and we were always clean, and our clothes were always clean, and we always looked nice going to school. My mother being from Iceland, where you learn how to make clothes, you learn how to cook and take care of yourself.
She made soap. Tell us about her making soap.
Out on the farm. Yes, you save your grease, and then you add lye to it. That's all I can remember. You add lye to the grease, and you cook up your own soap.
Soap.
Yeah. My mother made, I think it was $15 a month. Or was it every 2 weeks? I can't remember for sure, but I know she earned enough living that on her way home from work downtown LA, she would stop at the farmer's market on 4th and Hill, and she would bring home shopping bags full of groceries, vegetables, potatoes, everything that was healthy, even some meat. And we children would meet her at the streetcar, and up on the hill, it came above the school, there was a streetcar track, and we would go meet her up there and carry home all the groceries. And she was a good cook and learned from home in Iceland how to cook up food and always have good, healthy food on hand. We didn't know that we weren't rich. My mother kept us all, boys and all of us, dressed clean, and we fit in with all the struggling newcomers to America.
Yeah.
And
What did you do for fun? What did you enjoy doing?
our fun was a great big tree in our yard with a swing on it. And all the boys in the neighborhood would come because Victor was very ingenious and a leader. And all the kids did what Victor taught them to do. And we played baseball out on the street, and we hit tin can kicking, or you had a bat and hit a tin can. They called it Tin Can Alley or something. We used to play.
And tell us about when you were with the children on television. You were with the what did you call a group? was on television as children?
Our gang
Our
comedy.
Gang comedies, yeah.
Yeah.
Tell us about Our Gang
It was
comedies.
just at the end of our block by the LA River that they had a big old barn. And this is where they made the movies for Our Gang comedies. And we could just walk down there, and if we stayed behind the fence, we could watch wooden fence. We could watch them make the movie, and it was so entertaining. Sometimes they used the neighborhood kids as background, like looking over a fence at what was happening, and they was always something to watch there. People had horses, and life was, we thought our life was just wonderful and full. And my mother worked very hard.
How old were you during the Our Gang comedy?
I was, well, we moved there, let's see, 5, 6, 7, 8, like that.
Ah.
We went all the way through Alessandro School and graduated, all of us.
But you were in the Our Gang comedy. Tell us about when they asked you to be in Our Gang.
Well, when they would need a gang, a crowd scene, then they would let us, all the neighborhood kids, be watching what the little actors were doing. And they were, of course, all, one girl, they had her hair combed to the top of her head, and then it went straight up on a braid for about 12 inches, and then they'd have a bow on her hair up there, and she always had her hair up like that. It was cute. And who was the other kids? They were really a clever bunch of kids, and they had them dressed in baggy clothes, old hats, floppy hats. They were not like city kids. It was all rough and ready kids.
Rough and ready kids.
Yeah. And so we could always go down and watch them acting, and that was interesting. That was right next to the river. LA River went on the other side of the barn.
And did you see Spanky and all those movies?
Yes, sure, we saw Spanky. And all the girls and all the little boys.
What were they like, the children? Were they
Very, they were actors, and they did what they were told. They were being directed what to do, and they were very obedient and serious about what they were doing. Yeah. And sometimes they would have the boys, like, on those, they made their own cars back there out of wood and skate wheels or whatever kind of wheels they could find, and boards, and built their own what looked like kind of like cars, and they would ride them down the street, and get scenes of the kids riding in their homemade cars. There was the Nardoni family had a vegetable truck and pulled by horses, and Mr. Nardoni would sit up in the front on this one bench seat, and the open back would be full of all kind of vegetables, and he would come down the street and hollering, vegetables for sale, and oranges, apples, bananas, and then the other trucks would come along, rags, bottles, sacks, somebody collecting. They could make money by selling the trash that people threw away, and you'd put those out for the rag man. And those people grew up to be, the Nardoni boy was a boxer, and he's very well known, I think even today, as a boxer back then.
And you got to see him. You saw Nardoni.
We got to see them, and we got to see actors, and
Spanky and all the children
and
there?
Spanky, and one little boy would wear a black top hat about a foot above his head. I mean, it went tall above his head, about a foot, all black, and all the little characters that they had back then.
And do you know the name of the Spanky, the Our Gang that you were in?
Our gang comedies is
Yeah,
all.
you were in one of them, or two of them, or more than one?
Sometimes they would use the neighborhood kids just to like be looking over a fence, not acting, but just as a
A background.
background.
Like a background.
Yeah, yeah.
How many do you think you were in?
Probably a half a dozen, I would say.
Oh, my
Now I
God.
don't remember too much about back then, but
Yeah.
we were so interested in watching the kids that were actors. And
Yeah, they were famous.
at that time, tap dancing was the being taught in homes, and boys and girls would learn to tap dance, and the teachers would come to different homes, and I think for 15 cents you could go and learn how to tap dance. It was very popular back then, tap dancing,
Oh.
because the movie, like Shirley Temple, was would tap dance, and that was what the kids did back then. You'd pay 15 cents for a tap dance lesson.
Now, did you ever see Shirley Temple?
I'm trying to think. Shirley Temple. I think she was later. She was
Oh.
not at this time. These were just
After
our gang comedies is what it was called.
Right,
Our gang comedies, yeah.
Yeah.
Just a gang of kids, and then the neighborhood kids were used for looking over a fence or just background.
Ah. Okay, and was that a happy time in your life?
Oh, yeah, yeah. We didn't know that we were poor. My mother kept us all clean and dressed, and everybody was in the same boat. They were all struggling to work, and we made our own fun playing hopscotch on the sidewalk, and the boys with their baseball out in the street playing. I don't know what it was called. We used curbs for bases, and of course with a bat and ball, the kids were happy.
And how old do you think you were back during our gang comedies? How old were you then?
I think around 6.
6 or 7?
Yeah, 6. And I remember Mother sending me to the store, going through people's farm. Like they would be, somebody would have a yard full of vegetables, and instead of going down the sidewalk, we would cut through farms the closest direction, straightest direction to the store, and asparagus fields, and a lot of the man that lived behind us, his whole house, he had little baby chickens in his house, and he raised chickens right in the house, because that way they were safe from dogs and cats getting at them. And we could go over there and go and see all his baby chickens running around on his hardwood floors.
And did you buy chickens from him?
No, we didn't. No, we had at the corner grocery, Nelson's Groceries, and we did our shopping there. I remember one time a milk came in a glass bottle, and I was carrying a glass bottle home, and it slipped through my fingers and fell on the sidewalk and broke. And it was 9 cents for a quart of milk, and I didn't dare go home and tell my mother I dropped my milk. And I went back to the market, and I told Mr. Nelson I broke my bottle of milk, and he gave me another bottle. And they were very good friends and looked out for the children and the people that were having a struggle then. Mr. Nelson was very kind-hearted. I remember them having us children in for a meal, and right in the aisle of their store, they would pull down from the side a shelf, and they ate in the store, and we sat around 3 sides of a pull-down table, and they had us for lunch. They were very kind people, and
What were their names, Mom?
Mr. Nelson. There was John Nelson, and there was Herbert Nelson. And Herbert Nelson was favored. He was not very well, and when the cookie box got low, they would let him take the whole bottom, maybe 6 or 8 cookies, and they'd give it to little Herbert, and he'd come where we were all playing in our yard, and he'd climb up in the tree with his box of cookies, and he would eat them all to himself. And back then, for to have a cookie was a real treat. And but he died young, so they knew what they were doing. They took a special favor to little Herbert Nelson.
Herbert Nelson.
Yeah.
Okay, well, thank you. That has been a good morning. So we did our good morning.
Ron, I hope. Herbert Nelson. We didn't understand why he wouldn't share his cookies, but now